My name is Renata Osei. I am 34 years old. On the morning of March 7th, I sat in Courtroom 11B of the Cuyahoga County Domestic Relations Court and listened to my mother tell a judge that I was unstable, dangerous, unfit to raise my own child. She spoke for 4 minutes without looking at me once. She talked about my emotional episodes. She talked about my pattern of poor decision-making.
She talked about Senna's well-being as though Senna were a child already in danger, already suffering, already in need of rescue from her own mother. She said the words like she had practiced them, like she had stood in front of a bathroom mirror and rehearsed them until they came out smooth. When she finished, she folded her hands in her lap, and my father reached over and patted them, like they had done something good. I did not stand up. I did not cry out. I did not lean over to my attorney and whisper anything. I sat with my back straight and my hands flat on the table, and I let her finish. What they did not know, what neither of them had the slightest idea about, was that the small stuffed bear sitting on my daughter's bookshelf at home had been recording audio inside that apartment for 4 months. Every conversation, every visit, every word. And I had every file backed up in 3 places. If this story is already hitting you somewhere deep, do me a favor right now. Give this video a like and subscribe, because stories like this one take real time to tell, and I want to keep telling them. And drop your city and your local time in the comments. I mean it. I genuinely love knowing where in the world you're listening from. It's 2 a.m. in Lagos, or a Tuesday lunch break in Leeds, or rush hour in Houston. It matters to me. Leave it below. Team Renata, I need you with me. Let's go. I'm Renata. This is the story of how my own parents weaponized a family court system against me. How I spent 11 months building a case in silence while they believed they were winning, and how the truth they had spent years trying to bury came out in front of a judge, 2 attorneys, a guardian ad litem, and a packed courtroom gallery of people who knew exactly who my family was. Let me take you back past that courtroom, back past the bear, back to where it actually started. 14 years before March 7th, I was 20 years old and sitting at the kitchen table of my parents' house in Shaker Heights, Ohio, holding an acceptance letter from Ohio State's nursing program. It was August. The window above the sink was open and the smell of fried plantain was coming through from next door. And I remember thinking, finally something that is mine. I had worked for that letter. Not the way you work when you have a comfortable home and 2 parents cheering you on and a room that belongs only to you. I worked the way you work when the house around you has other priorities, bigger, louder priorities, and your own ambitions have to be folded small and hidden somewhere they won't be stepped on. I applied in secret. I asked my guidance counselor to mail all communications to her office so nothing came to the house. I wrote my personal statement at the school library between 3:30 and 5 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which were the only 2 days I had a break in my afternoon responsibilities. I did not tell my parents I had applied. I did not tell my sister. I did not tell anyone. The letter arrived at the school in July. My counselor, Mrs. Petrakis, called me in and slid it across her desk with a look on her face that I still think about sometimes. Not just proud, something closer to relieved. Like she had been watching me for 4 years and waiting for something good to happen for me. I read it in her office, read it again, walked home holding it against my chest. And then I made the mistake of showing it to my mother. She took the letter, read it once. "You're not going anywhere," she said. "Your sister needs you here." Her name was Adeze, my sister. 3 years older than me, and she had cerebral palsy, moderate severity. And she had been my mother's reason for everything since I was 7 years old. Why I didn't go on school trips, why I didn't join the swim team, why I came home the instant school let out, every day, for 11 years, to help with her therapy exercises, her meals, her routine. tell you that to make you feel sorry for Adese. I tell you that so you understand what was built around her and around me. Because here is what my parents never said plainly, but built into the structure of every decision from the time I was old enough to be useful. Adesizi was the one who would have the life. The accommodations, the specialists, the summer program in Pennsylvania that cost $14,000. All of it paid for. All of it fought for. Loudly, publicly, with GoFundMe campaigns and church fundraisers, and my parents' photos in the Shaker Heights community newsletter under headlines that read, "Family sacrifices everything for special needs daughter." And I was the engine. The letter from Ohio State went in the recycling bin that afternoon. I watched it go. My mother pushed it to the bottom of the bin, under the coffee grounds and the orange peels, and then she washed her hands at the sink and began making dinner like nothing had happened. Like an acceptance letter to a nursing program was just another piece of paper. Like the thing I had spent 4 years quietly working toward had the same weight as a grocery circular. My father was not in the kitchen when this happened. He rarely was when these decisions were made. He had a gift for being elsewhere at the precise moments that would have required him to take a position. My mother called a facility manager friend to ask about overnight care options, not for Adezizi's sake, but because she wanted to see what they cost so she could tell me how impractical my ambitions were. That was the word she used, ambitions. In her mouth, it sounded like vanity, like something you should be ashamed of. I stayed. I stayed for 3 more years. I worked as a home health aide at a practice in Warrensville Heights, making $13.40 an hour, and I handed 2/3 of my paycheck to my mother every week for household expenses. I have the Venmo records, every single transfer. I have them now, and I had them then. What those years looked like from the outside was a young woman choosing family over ambition. That is not what they were. From the inside, they were a system. I woke at 6. I helped with Adaizi's morning routine before the day aide arrived at 8. The stretches, the breakfast, the medication, the particular order of things that Adaizi needed and that my mother had never fully explained to the aides because she preferred me. I left for work at 8:30. I came home by 5:30. I helped again in the evening. Dinner, the exercises the physical therapist had left, the wind-down routine. On the nights my parents had church or community events, I stayed home and did all of it alone. I was 21, 22, 23, and the whole time, my mother was telling the church, the newsletter, the GoFundMe donors, anyone who would listen, that this family had sacrificed so much, that these 2 devoted parents had given everything for their disabled daughter, that God had blessed them with a special child, and they had risen to the occasion. I was not in any of the photos on the newsletter. Not one. Not because they forgot. Because I was the infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't appear in the photographs. It just holds everything up. My sister loved me. I want to say that clearly. Whatever was built around her, the machinery of obligation and sacrifice that my parents constructed, she had nothing to do with it. On Tuesday evenings, when our parents went to Bible study and it was just the 2 of us, she would make me watch reality TV I hated, and she would laugh until she cried, and it was the easiest I ever breathed inside that house. She had a specific, uproarious laugh for contestants who made bad decisions. She would look at me with wide eyes and say, Renata, are you seeing this?" And I would say yes, and we would both dissolve. Those Tuesday evenings were genuinely some of the best hours of my 20s. She knew the situation was wrong. She told me once, quietly, on a Tuesday in February when I was 22. She said, "You should have gone to Columbus." I said, "It's fine." She said, "It's not." We didn't talk about it again. There was nothing to talk about. The architecture was already built. Neither of us had drawn the plans. By the time I was 23, I had started to understand something. The sacrifice my parents asked of me was not temporary. It was not just until Adese stabilizes. It was structural, permanent. They had designed a life in which I was the infrastructure, invisible and load-bearing, and they were the visible family, the good parents, the devoted siblings, the community pillars who had given so much. I began keeping notes, not because I had a plan. I didn't have a plan yet. I kept notes the way you do when you sense that something is wrong and you don't yet know how to name it. Small jottings in the back of a notebook, dated, describing what was asked of me and when and by whom.
October 14th. Asked to cancel a shift to cover for the day aide who called in. Not paid for the missed shift. November 2nd. Transferred $1,340 to mother's account. Marked household. December. Asked to reschedule a dentist appointment because it conflicted with a church fundraiser I was needed at. Small things. Individually, nothing. Cumulatively, a pattern. The notebook started as a reflex and became a discipline.
Every transfer, every canceled plan, every instance of my schedule being restructured around someone else's need without acknowledgement or compensation. I didn't know what I was building toward. I just knew that unnamed things have a way of staying unnamed, and I was tired of living inside something I couldn't name. I met Kwiku at a continuing education seminar for home health workers in October of that year. He was an occupational therapist.
He was funny in a way that felt like an accident. Like he didn't know he was funny. He just said true things in precise words, and you laughed. At the seminar, he raised his hand to ask about a billing code and made the instructor reconsider her answer, politely, with 3 sentences, and then turned back to his notebook without seeming to notice that half the room was looking at him. I noticed. We had coffee after the seminar. We had dinner the following weekend. We talked for 3 hours at a restaurant in Cleveland Heights, and I remember thinking, somewhere in the second hour, that I had forgotten to monitor what I was saying. That I was just saying things, the real things, the way I talked to Adaze on Tuesdays. The ease of it scared me a little. He was patient, not in the passive way, in the active way, where you can tell someone is genuinely interested in the texture of what you're telling them and is waiting to understand it, rather than waiting for their turn to speak. I told him a version of my family situation on the second date, a careful version with the edges sanded down. He listened. He asked 2 questions. He did not offer solutions or make me feel like a case study. My parents met him twice and decided in the space of those 2 dinners that he was a problem. He's going to take you away, my mother said, as if that were a diagnosis, as if leaving were a disease. She did not say this to Kweku. She said it to me the evening after the second dinner while we were washing dishes. Kweku had gone home. My father was in the other room. My mother washed a glass and dried it very carefully and said, without looking at me, "He's going to take you away." I said, "Mom, I'm 23. I work a full-time job and I give you 2/3 of my income. I am allowed to have a relationship." She set the glass down on the counter with a precise, controlled click. She didn't say anything else. She went to bed. That was how my mother won arguments. She stopped engaging when she realized she wasn't going to win the word exchange, and she went quiet, and she let the silence do the work. In a house where I had been trained since childhood to interpret her silence as disappointment, her silence was very effective. We got engaged 18 months later. I was 25. It was quiet, just the 2 of us, a restaurant in Tremont, a Thursday night. He had planned it badly and beautifully. The ring was in his coat pocket and not a velvet box, and it got caught in the lining, and he had to stand up and shake his whole coat while the table next to us watched. I said yes before he got it free. I did not tell my parents for 3 weeks. I wore the ring under my sleeve at the house. I told a Daisy first, a Tuesday night in November, and she grabbed my hand and looked at the ring for a long time and said, "It's beautiful, Renata," in a voice that was doing a lot of work. I hugged her. She held on for a moment longer than usual. When I did tell my parents, My mother's response was 6 words. Who will take care of Adaize? Not, congratulations. Not, we love Kwaku. Not, when is the wedding? Not, are you happy? 6 words, in the same tone she used when asking who had left the stove on. A logistics question. An inconvenience framed as a concern. I said, Adaize has 2 parents who are capable of organizing her care. My mother looked at my father. My father said nothing. He never said anything that my mother hadn't already said. In 23 years of watching them, I had rarely seen him hold a position that she hadn't first handed him. He was not a cruel man. He was an absent man. Emotionally absent. Perpetually deferred to my mother in all things domestic and familial. And his silence in every hard moment had the effect of endorsement. When she decided something, his silence meant yes. It always meant yes. We were married the following June. My parents came. They sat in the 3rd row. The ceremony was in a green courtyard in Little Italy, and Kwaku cried during the vows, quietly, contained, the way he did everything. And I held his hands and kept my voice even and said the words I meant. At the reception, my mother told 3 separate people, I know because all 3 of them told me afterward, that she didn't know how things were going to work now, that she was worried about Adaize, that it was a shame Renata had made this choice. A shame. I was 26 years old and marrying a man I loved in a green courtyard in Little Italy, and my mother was working the room like a grievance. Kwaku held my hand under the table all through dinner. He did not know what she was saying. I didn't tell him that night. I didn't want to give her the reception. So I held his hand back, and I looked at the lights strung above us, and I decided that this was mine. This evening was mine. She could have the whisper campaign. I had the courtyard and the lights and the man who had shaken his coat pocket in a restaurant and meant every word. Our daughter was born on April 3rd, 2 years later. We named her Sina. 6 pounds, 14 ounces. She had Kwaku's eyes from the moment they opened, dark and patient and already somehow knowing. She came into the world at 4:47 in the morning, and I held her for a long time before I let anyone else. And I thought, with a clarity I had never felt before, I would do anything, everything, for this specific person. I did not know yet how literally that would be tested. My mother arrived at the hospital within 2 hours of the birth. She appeared at the door of the room while I was still in the initial holding and stunned stage that new mothers have, and she was dressed, made up, composed, as though she had been ready to come for hours. She held Sina for 45 minutes. Kwaku had to ask her back. I told myself it was grandparent excitement, new baby energy, the specific intoxication of a new grandchild. I told myself a lot of things in those early months because I was exhausted in the particular way that only new parents are exhausted. Dissolved, joyful, raw, and I did not have the bandwidth to track the smaller signals. But they were there. Looking back, they were absolutely there. My mother began coming to the apartment on Saturdays without calling first, then Thursdays, then sometimes midweek, appearing at the door when Kwaku was at work, when it was just me and Senna. She would make suggestions about the feeding schedule, the sleep routine, the way I was carrying Sina on my hip. She commented on the temperature of the apartment. She questioned whether the daylight was too direct through the bedroom window. She asked, with a particular tilt to the question, whether I was getting enough sleep. The tilt that was not concern, but inventory. She was cataloging. I could not have named it at the time, but she was cataloging. Once she moved a piece of furniture while I was nursing. Dragged the rocking chair 6 feet across the room without asking, repositioning it against a different wall, and then stood back and assessed it the way you assess a room you are furnishing. I said, "Mom, please ask before you move things." She looked at the ceiling in that particular way she had, patience performed, sainthood performed, and said, "I'm only trying to help." She was not trying to help. She was running reconnaissance. She was learning the apartment, learning Serena's rhythms, learning where the space was that she could move into. She had done this before. In the Shaker Heights house, she had done this to every room, every relationship, every system, until she understood exactly where the load was and how to position herself as indispensable to it. I began keeping notes again. The app on my phone, time-stamped, detailed, every incident. Not because I had a plan. Not yet. But because I was my mother's daughter in at least one way, I understood that things said without witnesses can be unsaid, and I was not going to be caught without witnesses again. When Sino was 14 months old, Kwaku got a contract position offer in Columbus, a hospital OT department, 18 months, significant pay increase. We talked about it for 2 weeks. We made a spreadsheet. We weighed the cost of living differential, the commute implications, Sena's daycare options, the distance from my parents versus the distance from Kwaku's mother in Westerville. We decided to go. I told my parents at dinner on a Sunday in February. My mother put her fork down. Not dramatically. That wasn't her style. She set it down with the same controlled precision she used for everything. The fork placed parallel to the knife, the hands folded in front of her plate. "You're taking Sena away from us," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. "We're moving 90 minutes away," I said. "Children need their grandparents. She'll see you on weekends." "That is not enough." She picked up her fork. "I'm going to speak to someone about this." I thought she meant a friend, a pastor, someone to vent to, someone who would tell her that 90 minutes was not a tragedy, someone who would tell her that her daughter was allowed to build a life. She meant a family attorney. The first letter arrived 6 weeks after we moved to Columbus. Addressed to Kwaku and me, from a law office in Beechwood, Ohio. My parents were petitioning for court-ordered grandparent visitation rights under the Ohio Revised Code. I read it standing in the kitchen in our new apartment on Indianola Avenue. Sina was asleep. The sound of her white noise machine came through the wall. It was a Tuesday morning in April, and the light through the kitchen window was that specific spring light, bright and still cool. And I stood there and read the letter twice, and felt something settle into place. Not shock. Not even surprise, really. Something more like, oh, so this is what it was always going to be. Kwaku read it next. He set it on the counter. "How long have they been planning this?" he said. I didn't have an answer. But looking back at everything, the unannounced visits, the furniture, the way my mother had started photographing herself with Sena on every visit, the comments at the wedding, the needlepoint precision of, "I'm going to speak to someone." I think she had been planning it for a long time. Since the engagement. Maybe before. Maybe since the moment she understood that I was going to leave, one way or another, and that leaving meant the machinery would have to be reconfigured. We hired an attorney named Patricia Adler out of Columbus, who had 22 years in family court. She was small and careful, and she listened to everything before she spoke. When she did speak, she said, "Ohio has grandparent visitation statutes, but they require certain conditions. If your marriage is intact and there's no existing court involvement, the bar for a grandparent to obtain visitation over the objection of a fit parent is high. We have work to do, but we are not starting from behind." Then she said, "Keep notes of everything. Dates, times, exactly what was said." I handed her my phone across the desk. She scrolled for a long time. Long enough that I started to wonder if the volume of it was going to be a problem. Long enough that I watched her expression shift from professional assessment to something quieter and more focused. "Good," she said finally. "Keep going." The grandparent visitation petition was the opening move. I understood that later. What followed was a pressure campaign, slow and multi-fronted, that I think was designed to make Kwaku and me fracture under stress so that my parents could point to instability. Looking back at the timeline, I can trace it precisely. A campaign has a logic to it. Once you understand the logic, each move becomes legible. March, The petition filed. April. My mother began calling Kweku's mother, a woman she had met exactly twice, to express concern about my mental health. She called her on a Thursday evening. Kweku's mother, whose name is Abena, and who was one of the steadiest people I have ever met, called Kweku immediately and told him every word. Every specific word. She said, "I'm going to tell you exactly what she said to me because you need to know what you're dealing with." And she did.
She had taken notes while my mother was talking. My parents filed a supplemental motion requesting a guardian ad litem be appointed for Senna. Their filing alleged I had a history of emotional instability and suggested Senna's welfare required independent investigation. The filing used words like erratic and withdrawn and fearful. I read those words in a court filing about my own child, and I sat very still for a long time before I called Patricia. June, my mother began sending Senna's pediatrician letters.
Not calls, letters, on personal stationery with a matching envelope and a return address label expressing concern about Senna's developmental well-being. 2 letters in 6 weeks. The pediatrician's office, to their enormous credit, called Patricia Adler directly. They did not respond to my mother. They did not alter Senna's records. They flagged the correspondence and called my attorney. Patricia called me that evening. "They are building a paper trail," she said. "They're trying to get it into the record that third parties share their concerns. The pediatrician contact is significant because they're hoping the doctor will respond in a way they can screenshot. We need to stay ahead of this. What do? We document. We cooperate completely with the guardian ad litem. We keep Senna's routine stable, her environment documented, her well-being on record. We get character statements from anyone who sees her regularly. Daycare teachers, Kweku's mother, your friend Denise, anyone. And we do not engage with them directly. Not one call, not one text, not one message. Nothing. Every communication goes through me." I hung up the phone and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I thought about the recycling bin in Shaker Heights. I thought about the church newsletter. I thought about my mother's hands folded in her lap at the wedding dinner while she told 3 separate people it was a shame. I was not going to lose my daughter to the same machinery that had taken my 20s. I was not. The bear came into our lives the previous Christmas. Kweku's Aunt Ifua had bought it for Senna, a large brown stuffed bear with a hard stitched nose and a tag that said Benny. Senna loved it with the unreasonable intensity that toddlers love things. She slept with it, she carried it to the bathroom, she narrated to it extensively in a language that was approximately 40% English and 60% Senna-specific vocabulary that we were still learning to translate. Benny was present at every meal. Benny had opinions about everything. When Sina woke in the night and couldn't settle, the first word she said was Benny. In late July, 2 months into the pressure campaign, I was talking to my friend Denise on the phone. Denise, who had been my closest friend since the home health aide job, who knew my family, who had sat with me through every escalation, who had watched me build this case one note at a time and never once told me I was overreacting. And she said something I had been thinking but hadn't said aloud. "Renata," she said, "you know they're going to lie in court." I knew they're going to coach people, your aunt, whoever they can get to sign something. They're going to walk people through what to say. I knew that too. So you need something they can't lie about. She told me about a nanny cam device that fit inside stuffed animals, a small audio and video unit, battery operated, that connected to a home network and uploaded continuously to cloud storage. She'd seen it advertised for parents monitoring babysitters. Simple installation, continuous recording, cloud backup. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't think about it for long. I want to be clear about this part, because I know what it sounds like. I know that I put a camera in my child's bedroom lands a certain way when you hear it without context. So let me give you the context. I researched Ohio's recording consent laws carefully. Not a quick internet search. I printed the statute. Ohio is a one-party consent state for audio recording, meaning that as long as one participant in a conversation has consented to the recording is legal. In my own home with my own child, I was that participant. I also consulted with Patricia before I purchased anything. I described the device to her, I described the planned placement. She spent 20 minutes walking me through what was and wasn't admissible, what could and couldn't be used, and under what circumstances. If they come to your home, she said, and they say things in front of that child that speak to their intent, their character, or their credibility, yes, that is relevant. Document the placement date, the setup, the chain of custody of the recordings. We want this airtight. I ordered the device that night. It arrived in 3 days. I fitted it into Benny, behind the stitching at the back, at an angle where the lens could see the door of Sina's room. I tested the upload connection. I backed up the test footage to 2 separate cloud services and an external hard drive. I wrote down the date, the time, the device specifications, and the installation process in a document that Patricia kept a copy of. The date was August 2nd. My parents' first unsupervised visit to the Columbus apartment, ordered by the temporary emergency motion the court had granted while the case was pending, happened on August 14th. They arrived at 10 in the morning. Senna was in her pajamas still, and she ran to them, as toddlers do, as though absence were always followed by reunion, and reunion were always a good thing. My mother caught her and held her, and in that moment, my mother's face was soft in a way it rarely was when she looked at me. That was real. Whatever else was happening, Senna was real to her in that particular way. I kissed Senna. I told her I'd be back soon. I handed her to my mother at the door and drove to Denise's house to wait. 3 hours and 42 minutes. That was the visit. When I came back, Sina was tired and clingy in the way she got when she was overwhelmed. Not distressed, just depleted, wanting the familiar weight of me. My mother handed her to me without making eye contact. My father was already moving toward the door. "She missed you," my mother said, which was the closest she ever got to acknowledging that I was Sina's mother. That night, after Sina was asleep, Benny in the crook of her arm, I opened the Cloud app on my laptop. I want to tell you what I heard. For the first 40 minutes, it was ordinary. My mother making Sina lunch, the specific negotiation of a toddler who wants crackers and is being offered something more nutritious. My father reading a board book about ducks with full characterization for each duck. I'll give him that. He was a good reader of board books. The sounds of a regular afternoon. Then Sina fell asleep on the couch, and my parents started talking. "The house is fine. It's not what I expected. She's doing better than I thought she'd be." A pause. The sound of a chair. My father. "So what do we tell Patricia?" Meaning their attorney, also named Patricia, a coincidence that had delighted my attorney when she heard it. "We tell their Patricia what exactly?" My mother. "We tell her what we agreed, that Senna seems understimulated, that the environment is concerning, that we don't think Renata is coping." My father. "But she seems fine." My mother. "It doesn't matter what she seems. It matters what we say." I sat in my kitchen at 11:30 at night, and I listened to that twice more. The second time, I listened with my eyes closed. The third time, I had a notepad beside me, and I wrote the timestamp and the exact words. Then I called Patricia Adler. She answered on the third ring. I said, "I have something." She said, "Tell me." I told her. I read her the timestamp. I read her the words. There was a pause on her end. "How's the audio quality?" she said. "Clear," I said. "Very clear." Another pause. "Send me the file tonight. And Renata, don't tell anyone else about this yet. Not Denise, not Kweku's mother, no one. Just you and me until we know what we have." Over the next 3 months, There were 4 more visits. Each time, Benny was on the shelf. Each time, my parents left, and I listened that same night. Never the next morning, always that night, while everything was fresh, and I sent the file to Patricia within the hour. The recordings formed a picture. It was not the picture of concerned grandparents worried about their grandchild's welfare. It was the picture of 2 people coordinating a legal strategy around fabricated claims. The precision of it was worse than anger would have been. Anger is impulsive. What I heard was methodical. In one recording, my mother dictated specific phrases she wanted my father to use when the guardian ad litem interviewed him. The words withdrawn and erratic and the child seemed fearful. She said them slowly, with emphasis, so he could repeat them back. He repeated them back. She corrected his inflection. In another recording, she discussed coaching my aunt, who had agreed to submit an affidavit on their behalf, on what to include. She listed the specific incidents she wanted my aunt to describe. My aunt had been present at exactly 1 visit to our apartment. My mother was telling her how to describe things she had not seen. In a third recording, sitting in Sina's room while Sina napped between them, this is the one I keep coming back to, my mother said something I will hear for the rest of my life. If we get the order, she'll have to bring Sina to us every weekend, every week, like it was always supposed to be. My father said, and if we don't? My mother, then we escalate. We ask for an evaluation. We make it expensive enough that she can't fight it. Kweku's contract ends in April. If she's dealing with a contested evaluation, she'll be stretched thin. People make mistakes when they're stretched thin. I sat in the car in Denise's driveway. I had driven there to listen because I didn't want to be alone in the apartment when I heard it. And I listened to that for the 4th time. Senna was 18 months old. And my mother was discussing the strategy for financially exhausting me into submission so thoroughly that I would eventually hand over my daughter just to make it stop. It was the same playbook, different target. Everything I had been to them, the engine, the resource, the thing you put pressure on until it yields, they had decided Senna would be next. Not a child to love, not a grandchild to cherish. A lever. Not while I was breathing. I want to tell you about the months between that recording and the courtroom, because they matter. Because the distance between having something and being able to use it is where cases are won or lost, and Patricia understood that with a precision I came to rely on entirely. She had the recordings certified by a digital forensics firm in Columbus, a firm she worked with regularly, who documented the chain of custody, authenticated the timestamps, verified the file integrity, and produced a report that established that the recordings were unaltered and that the metadata was consistent with the claimed recording dates. This took 6 weeks and cost $3,800. I paid it. I would have paid 4 times that. She also began gathering the surrounding documentation, the thing that would give the recordings context and weight, the Venmo transfers. 17 months of records, showing transfers to my mother ranging from $1,240 to $1,560 per month, beginning when I was 20 years old and continuing until 6 weeks before the wedding. In court, Patricia would name these plainly. Not household contributions, not voluntary family support. Money extracted from a daughter who had been systematically denied the ability to build her own financial independence. The letter from Sina's pediatrician, whom Patricia had spoken with directly, clarifying that she had received unsolicited written communications from my parents and had at no point expressed any concern about Sina's welfare to them or to any other party. The pediatrician wrote, "At no time did my office indicate concern about Sina's development, environment, or the quality of her care. The communications I received from Mrs. Osei were unsolicited and did not align with my clinical observations." The affidavit from Kweku's mother, Abena, detailing verbatim the phone call she had received from my mother, the call in which my mother had expressed concern about my mental health to a woman she had met twice, A woman she could not have genuinely known. A woman she had called because she needed a third party to have concerns on record. And the guardian ad litem's preliminary report, which had found no evidence of neglect, instability, or developmental concern. Margaret Hollis had visited our apartment twice. She had observed Sena at daycare. She had spoken with the teachers. The preliminary report described Sena as developmentally on track, well attached to both parents, and thriving in her current environment. It noted that the extended family conflict appeared high in acrimony, and that the petitioning grandparents demonstrated a level of persistence in their concerns disproportionate to the evidence available. Patricia presented all of this to the court on March 7th. My mother testified first. 4 minutes, as I described. She used the words erratic and withdrawn and fearful. She used them exactly as she had rehearsed them in the recording, with exactly the emphasis she had drilled in the recording. And I sat at the table and listened and kept my hands flat on the surface and did not move. My parents' attorney presented their witnesses. My aunt, who submitted an affidavit describing an apartment visit in terms that did not match any visit that had actually occurred, and a family friend who testified to concerns that turned out, under Patricia's cross-examination, to have originated with my mother in a phone call. And then Patricia presented our case. She did not dramatize it. That was not her style, and it was not what the situation needed. She presented it systematically, one document at a time, in chronological order, with the forensic certification entered first, so the foundation was clear before the content was heard. When she played the first recording, the August 14th recording, the one with, "It doesn't matter what she seems, it matters what we say," the room did something I can only describe as a collective intake of breath, and then stillness. Not a gasp, something quieter than that. The recognition of a thing clearly named. My parents' attorney objected to the recordings. The judge overruled him. She read the forensic certification. She noted the consent law. She read the transcripts herself in silence for 4 minutes that felt like a year. Then she looked up. I want to tell you about that moment without making it bigger than it was, because the truth of it is quiet. My mother, across the courtroom, had gone still. Not the controlled stillness of her public composure, a different kind. The stillness of someone whose game has been named in a room full of people who heard the naming. My father was looking at the table. Their attorney had stopped taking notes. The judge said, "I've heard enough for today. We're going to recess, and when we return, I'd like to discuss the question of whether this petition serves the best interests of the child." She said it without anger. She said it with something worse than anger. She said it the way judges talk when they've already decided. If you're Team Renata right now, drop it in the comments. I need to know you're with me. When we returned from recess, the guardian ad litem asked to speak first. Margaret Hollis stood up. She was a woman of about 55, precise in her movements, with reading glasses on a lanyard that she had not had to use today because she had clearly memorized what she needed to say. She said, "In my 21 years conducting guardian ad litem investigations, I have not encountered a case where the petitioning party's own recorded statements so thoroughly contradicted the basis of their petition. The recordings demonstrate coordination of false testimony, coaching of witness statements, and explicit discussion of using litigation as a financial attrition strategy against the respondent. I cannot in good conscience recommend that the court grant any form of court-ordered visitation to the petitioning grandparents at this time." She sat down. The room was quiet. The judge looked at my parents' table. She said, "Counsel, would your clients like to withdraw the petition at this time?" A pause. A whispered conference. Their attorney straightening his papers, then straightening them again. My father reaching over and saying something to my mother, quietly, and my mother giving a single, controlled nod. "Your Honor," their attorney said, "the petitioners wish to withdraw." I want to tell you about the hallway, because the hallway is where the real ending happened. We were outside the courtroom, waiting for the elevator. Kwaku beside me, Patricia checking her phone on my other side, when my mother walked past me. She walked past me the way you walk past a stranger when you don't want to make eye contact. Eyes ahead, chin up. The performance of composure operating on full power even now. She had her coat on already. She had buttoned every button. She didn't say anything to me. I didn't say anything to her. There was nothing to say. The things she had said, it doesn't matter what she seems. It matters what we say every week, like it was always supposed to be. We make it expensive enough that she can't fight it. She had said them in my daughter's bedroom while my daughter slept 2 feet away. They were on record. They were certified. They had been heard by a judge and a guardian ad litem and a full courtroom gallery. They were gone from her possession and in the world now, permanently. She pushed the elevator button. The elevator came. She got in. The doors closed. I stood in the hallway, and I breathed. The aftermath was concrete and swift. The petition was dismissed with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled on the same grounds. My parents cannot return to court on this matter. The door is closed. My parents' attorney, in a letter to Patricia 3 weeks later, indicated that his clients did not intend to pursue further legal action. He also indicated, this is notable, that he would no longer be representing them. When an attorney quietly steps away from a client after something like this, after the thing they were asked to argue in court has been exposed as coordinated fabrication on record, it tells you something about how they feel about what they were asked to represent. My mother called me once, 7 weeks after the hearing. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail said she hoped we could move forward, that family was important, that she hoped I wouldn't keep Senna from her grandparents. Her voice was measured and even. She did not cry. She did not express specific remorse. She did not name a single thing she had done. She did not apologize for any specific thing. She never named what she had done. Move forward was the whole of it, as though what had happened were a weather event. Something that occurred without agency, without design, without a mother dictating false phrases to her husband in a toddler's bedroom. Something you simply moved forward from. I did not call back. A Daisy texted me the evening of the court date. She had not known about the case. I hadn't told her because I hadn't wanted to put her in the middle of something she didn't cause and couldn't fix. She had been used enough. I was not going to use her again, not even accidentally, not even in the direction of justice. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I've always known. I'm so sorry it took this long. I sat on the floor of Senna's room, Senna asleep in her crib, Benny in the corner of it, and I cried for the first time in a long time. Not for the case, not for the recordings or the courtroom or any of it. I had been through all of that dry-eyed. I had needed to be dry-eyed. I cried for Adiesi, for the two of us, two sisters who loved each other, used as instruments against each other by the people who were supposed to hold us both. For the Tuesday evenings with the reality TV. For February in Shaker Heights when she said you should have gone to Columbus. For every year I had carried this, and she had known, and neither of us had known what to do with the knowing. I wrote back, "It's not your fault. It was never your fault." She wrote back, "I know, but I'm still sorry." We talk every Sunday now. She is doing well. She has a support coordinator she likes, and she has started a ceramics class, and she has opinions about reality TV that I find deeply wrong and completely delightful. She sends me photos of her bowls. They are lopsided. I tell her they are beautiful. They are, in the way that things made by someone who chose to make them always are. She is my sister. She always was. What was built around us, the machinery, the assignment, the invisible engine, and the chosen recipient, that was not us. That was something done to us. It is July now. 4 months since the courtroom. The apartment on Indianola is warm and a little too bright in the afternoons, and Senna has learned to say actually. Actually, Mama. Actually, and uses it constantly, with confidence, in wrong contexts, and it is the best thing I have ever heard. She used it last week to correct Kwaku's description of what color the sky was. He said blue. She said, actually, Dada, purple. He considered this for a moment. He said she had a point. Kwaku's contract was renewed. We signed a lease for another year. I am studying for my LPN boards. The nursing program I started, a night program at Columbus State, I'm 6 months in. It is harder than I expected, and more absorbing than I expected, and I am better at it than I feared. My clinical supervisor told me last month that I have good instincts for patients who can't fully articulate what they're feeling. I thought about that for a long time afterward. I understand people who can't fully articulate what they're feeling. I spent years being one of them. I am 34 years old, and I am doing this 14 years later than I was supposed to. And somehow that feels right rather than sad. Like it waited for me. Like it knew. Like the letter that went into the recycling bin in August was not destroyed, just deferred. And eventually, it found its way back. Benny sits on the shelf in Senna's room still. He doesn't have the device anymore. I removed it the week after the hearing, when it had done everything it needed to do. He's just a bear now. A slightly oversized, very loved bear with a hard-stitched nose and a worn spot on one ear where Senna chews when she's tired. She still carries him everywhere. He goes to daycare on special days. He is, by any measure, a well-traveled bear. Some nights I look at that shelf and I think about what it cost to get here. The years of transfers, the nursing letter in the recycling, the Tuesday evenings that were the only air I got, the hallway after the verdict. The voicemail I never answered. And some nights I just think, she is safe. She is mine. We are not going anywhere. There are families you are born into, and families you build. I was born into one that decided I was infrastructure, something to be used until I ran dry, something to be leveraged in the next generation when I finally could not be leveraged anymore. I built another one, imperfect and ongoing and loud, with the word actually and Kwaku's laugh from the other room, held together by choice and stubbornness, and a man who shook his coat pocket in a restaurant and meant every word. I fought to keep it. I don't have a neater way to say it than that. I fought. I documented. I stayed quiet for the right seasons and loud in the one room where it counted. I kept notes for 14 years and a bear on a shelf for 4 months. And I walked into a courtroom and I let the truth be heard. And then I came home and made dinner. And my daughter said, "Actually, Mama," about something that made no sense. And I laughed until I couldn't. That's the whole story. If something in this story stayed with you, the recordings, the receipts, the long, quiet work of not letting them win, share it. That's how these stories reach the people who need them. There are people listening right now who are in the middle of something like this, who are keeping notes on a phone and wondering if it's enough, and wondering if they're overreacting, and wondering if anyone is going to believe them. I want them to hear this. Subscribe if you want to keep hearing stories like Renata's, because there are more. There are always more, and I'll be here to tell them. And drop your city and your local time down below. I mean it every time. Tell me where you're listening from.